Welcome to the Navigating Hollywood podcast. My name is Alan Wolf, and I'm a filmmaker and an author. Navigating Hollywood encourages and equips entertainment professionals to live relationally and spiritually holistic lives. If you work in entertainment, visit navigatinghollywood.org to discover how you can get involved. Today, we are joined by actor Philip Winchester. Philip trained at the prestigious London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and his career quickly took off with roles in Thunderbirds and Flyboys. Philip received critical acclaim for his performance as Edmund in the RSC's production of King Lear, which toured globally, and then he played the lead role in the psychological thriller In My Sleep, that was written and directed by yours truly. His television career includes lead roles in Crusoe, the Emmy-nominated Strike Back, The Player, Chicago Justice, and Law and Order SVU. He also stars in the films Rogue, Endangered Species, and is featured in the Netflix series Ransom Canyon. Welcome, Philip!
It's so nice to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, you and I have been friends for many years.
Yes.
But I believe I'm in a rarefied class of friends who got to see you die 3 times when you performed in King Lear for the RSC.
That's right. Did you come 3 times?
Yeah, in Stratford-upon-Avon, in New York City, and in Los Angeles.
Oh, and in Los Angeles. That's right.
3 times.
Oh, so much fun.
I prefer seeing you living.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was an amazing experience to see you in those shows, in those different cities, even going back to where Shakespeare got his start. How did that experience impact your growth as an actor?
You know, it's funny. I think about it quite often now as I'm getting into my 40s. That happened. I was 25, 26 years old. And I just thought, yeah, this is what people do. You train in London, you get into the RSC. Hopefully you're lucky enough to work with someone like Ian McKellen and Trevor Nunn and travel the world. It was an extraordinary experience. I think the biggest takeaway from the RSC and from Ian McKellen being King Lear was that he would come out every night and do it differently, or at least try to do it differently. King Lear is extraordinarily complex and hard. Like the role of King Lear in King Lear I think it's one of the biggest roles next to Hamlet perhaps. And Ian would come out and he would change his inflection on one part or try and make it mean something else and try something else with the actors on stage every night. And I remember sitting backstage or waiting in the wings to come on with some of the younger actors as I was, and we would be listening and we would look at each other and go, he did it different tonight. He did something different. And there was just this really steep learning curve of new audience. It's the same material. How do we do it different? How do we make it interesting? It was such an amazing experience to watch him do that and to watch someone so well versed in their craft just take command of that stage every night and do such a good job with it. I look back on it and think just how fortunate I was to be a part of that, because I wasn't supposed to be in London for those auditions. I was going out to London with my mom to see some family. And while I was there, the phone rang, and I think it was kind of like, what are you doing next week? And I was like, oh, I'm getting on a plane and going back to LA. And they said, no, you should stay for a couple more days. And you should come and meet Trevor Nunn and do this audition. And so I went and met him, and it ended up working out, which was amazing.
Wow. And what an adventure going all over the world performing that show.
Really incredible. We started in Stratford-upon-Avon, and then we started going around the world. We started in Singapore at the Esplanade Theatre in Singapore. We were at the National Theatre in Melbourne. And then we went to New Zealand. We went to Wellington and Auckland. Then we had a bit of a break, and we picked up the pace again in Brooklyn at BAM. And then we were at the Guthrie in Minneapolis. And then we were in Royce Hall at UCLA, and then we finished in the West End. So it was about a year of really depressing material. King Lear and the Seagull. I remember looking at everybody. One day we were backstage in London in the West End, and we realized we'd been slogging through this really heavy material for a year. But what a gift to work.
I remember you saying, I think you were on stage maybe in Singapore, and you blanked out on your lines. And you were thinking of beavers or something. Do you remember this?
So they call it drying or going up or something like that, and on camera it's absolutely fine. You just say, I'm really sorry. Can we start over? So the funny thing about this moment was we were in Auckland, New Zealand, Peter Jackson was there. He was in the front row. And I was like, okay, I'm going to kill it tonight. We're going to get into some Lord of the Rings action here. And Edmund starts the play with this monologue. You know, he starts out, thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Wherefore should I stand in the plague of custom and permit the curiosity of nations to deprive me? And I remember I looked up, this spotlight that I'd never seen before hit me. It was like, you know, like a laser beam burned through my head. And I completely and utterly dried. I mean, I couldn't have told you my name. I couldn't have told you what I was wearing or what the color of my boots. It was just gone. And the first thought that came out of this quagmire of mud in my head was, I wonder why badgers have white stripes on their faces. And I went, okay. And I think I kind of got, thou nature art my goddess. And I just, like, the floor opened up. We trained at drama school. We trained for these moments by telling jokes in front of the class over and over and over again. So you'd initially get a laugh, and then the laugh would half, and it would half again. And then you'd just be standing there in this uncomfortable silence where time stood still, right? So I'm sure in the grand scheme of things, it was like, I don't know, like a 5-second dry. But in my head, you could have driven a semi through it, built a house, had a helicopter land on the roof, thrown a party. And all I did was call out my partner's name, his name was Ben Mages, and he was playing Edgar. And I just went, Edgar. And he came out like right on cue, because I think he heard it. He heard me go up and he came out and he was like, Edmund. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was horrific. Fast forward 3 hours of the play and we're at the after party and Peter Jackson walks right up to me and goes, hey, interesting cut. I was like, well, shoot.
Wow.
Well, shoot.
Brutal.
Just went up and it didn't come back, And that's the beauty of live theater, right? I think secretly the audience is hoping for that sometimes because they get to ride it out with you and they're like, what are you going to do?
That's why I think when an audience is watching a show where there are children or animals, they're just completely fascinated because you just don't know what they're going to do. What's going to go wrong? Yes. Amazing that they trained you in drama school how to deal with situations like that.
Well, yeah, obviously it didn't work brilliantly, did it? Because I do remember thinking in that space, like, it's shorter than you think. Take a breath and find it. Take a breath and find it. And it just didn't work.
Now, looking back, when did you first decide you wanted to be an actor?
I was raised by a single mother for the first 4 or 5 years of my life. And I watched her really do everything she could to provide. And she met a really great guy who she ended up marrying, who, while my mom was working nights at a nursing home, I'm 6-7 years old at this point. My dad, my now new dad, is taking courses at Montana State University. And one of his courses was a drama course. And so my mom was working nights at a nursing home. I would come out of kindergarten or first grade. She would pick me up and drop me off at Montana State University with my dad. And I would hang out backstage with all these theater actors, with Joel Janke, he headed up Montana Shakespeare in the parks here. And I watched these men and women learn their lines, like go from literally a blank stage with a ghost light to having boxes and scripts in their hands, and then the flats would come in, and then a few props would come in. And so the progression of building characters and things like that. And I grew up with actors, and I thought, well, this is what people do. And then probably, now that I'm older, I can look back and see that acting was a great way for me to act out, literally, quite literally, to act out on things that I wasn't quite aware of that were going on in my psyche and things I was dealing with about childhood and other insecurities that we deal with as young adults and as kids. And it was a way of dealing with that, probably, of being on stage and being silly and being the class clown, but getting recognition for it on a bigger level. So I remember saying to my mom and dad in high school, like, I want to be an actor. My mom and dad were brilliant because they said, okay. They could have said, don't be ridiculous. The chances of it working are 0.001%. They didn't. They said, okay. And then they backed it up with a brilliant proposition. My mom actually said, if you want to be an actor, you have to go to drama school in London. And I don't think she realized what an impactful statement that was, because to me as a young, I was a freshman or sophomore in high school at the time and was trying to make these decisions. Looking back, you're just like, yeah, great, thanks, Mom. She's agreeing to what I want to do. I win. But looking back, it was this really brave thing that she did as a parent, because she said, okay, do it. Go somewhere else. Experience a different culture. Spend time with family that you know but don't know that well yet. And so my whole life was completely inverted, and I was thrown into a culture that I thought I understood but didn't. I got to hang out with family that I only knew through vacations and good times, and I got to go through life with them for, about 7 years. So it was a really incredible gift. I'm not even sure my mom knows that she did that or knows that it was that much of a gift. But, looking back, I can see what a brilliant offer that was from her. Or I guess it was she said, fine, do it, but do it this way,
It is interesting how we can get so focused on maybe that career that we want, the training that we want, that we forget the important part of character building that can actually be even more important than that, because it gives you the stamina, the character to actually go through the journey that you're trying to do.
Right. You're exactly right. And, just to kind of jump onto the side of that, as an actor, as a director, as people who are trying to emulate real life, if you have no life experiences, if you just, you're just trying for that next goal and working towards success, you have nothing to draw from, right? London was an incredible gift because it was hard, so I was able to be broken into 1,000 pieces, and I had the love of a family. My grandmother was just the most incredible woman. She ran a bed and breakfast in England, by herself for probably 40, 50 years. I lived at this bed and breakfast. So I had this really great life where I was at drama school in the daytime. I rode a motorbike back and forth between London and where my grandma lived, just outside of London. And then all the guests who were staying at the bed and breakfast, which is pre-Airbnb, right? So we had directors who were staying and shooting. There's a television series out there called Coronation Street or EastEnders. And we had these directors who would stay there because it was close and it was cheap. Grandma had you had a single bed in your room, and there was a box of Weetabix on the table in the morning. And so, it was great. But all these characters came through the farm, and I got to see them and kind of hear their stories about working in the business, or businessmen who were coming through from all over Europe to do stuff in London. It was just a really neat culture of people and relationships that my grandma had created. And I was so privileged to be a part of that. It was really beautiful.
That's amazing. One of your, I think, career highlights would be Strike Back. Would you agree on that? Yeah. And you performed many of your own stunts on the show. Can you share some memorable stunt experiences?
Yeah, you bet. So Strike Back was funny, just like we didn't know how good we had it on at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I don't think Sully and I and some of the other core people who made Strike Back really understood how good we had it until we got thrown out of that system and put into the network system of television, The thing that was so extraordinary about Strike Back was we'd get our scripts, HBO would go make it. Carrie Antholis was the head of drama over there at the time, and he was brilliant. He loved the show, and he just said, make it as close to this as possible. But I trust you guys. You've had all the military training. We have military advisors on set. We have a core group of people who now make up Strike Back. If it's not exactly like it is on the page, but it's still fun, just do it. Just make sure it's fun. So there was this kind of unicorn world where we had the outlines of what they wanted, but we could also go off-roading a little bit if we wanted to and have fun with it. And it really worked. And I think part of that was accidental. So I remember episode 3 or 4 of the first season, this gal that Stonebridge, the character I play in the series, she's tied up and she's got a bomb vest on, and they know that they can't undo it. And so he knows he has to say goodbye to her, and he knows he has to leg it because the clock's ticking literally on her chest. And we had this wonderful South African special effects crew. How close do you want to be? And we were like, what do you mean? He's like, do you want to be in the explosion? Kind of. We were like, well, yeah, I mean, relatively close, right? We want to be in it. Like, how far? He said, well, and the director came up and he's like, with zoom lenses, we can make it look like you're really close, but we're going to set up kind of close to you, so it's got to be within 30 or 40 feet. So we were like, yeah, I mean, we'll be safe, right? He's like, oh, yeah. You'll be totally safe, right? So meanwhile, they're setting the shot up. They're filling the bomb pot up with, all the stuff they fill it up with, the dust and the gasoline and stuff like that. And we're having gel put on the back of our necks and all over the back of anything that's exposed gets fire gel on it. We're in the shot. We run away. They hit it. Boom, the thing goes off and it throws us to the ground. And we look up afterwards. And it was a really intense, emotional scene because Stonebridge loses a friend. But after the shot and after the cameras were turned off, we were like, oh my gosh, that was awesome, man. That was incredible. And I think the producers also saw, well, if these guys are willing to do it, why don't we keep doing that? Why don't we keep going down that road and exploring what this means to have a show where our lead actors really do as much of their stunts as possible? I think the beauty of the strike back world and incorporating stunts with Sully and I was we definitely had stuntmen who did some really crazy, dangerous things. But we also had these opportunities to do things that looked really dangerous. But I mean, if you said, okay, we're going to step off of a helicopter onto a train, then you're like, that's completely insane. But when you have a really good helicopter pilot and the train's moving at a constant speed, it's just a step. It looks insane and it looks scary and it sounds bonkers, but all these things were really thought out so that they were actually relatively safe.
I remember you sending me a picture of an explosion where it kind of was licking at the side of your face. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I do. So that was the one case where we were chasing a bad guy down this stairwell and he was throwing grenades kind of up behind him past us. We were on this rooftop in Cape Town and it was really windy. We had a bomb pot set up down this stairwell and they said, okay, we're going to light it off and it's just going to come out this doorway and it'll go right past you guys. But because that wind was circling around, that bomb pot went off and that gas and the fire and all that stuff, which is made, the propellants that they use burn really quickly so that if things like this happen, they don't stay on you. But it came up and it hit that wall of wind and it just splashed to the sides where Sully and I were. We kind of felt maybe something was off. And so both of us were sort of ready for it. But, our camera guys, they had protective gear on and it burned all their camera gear and it burned all their protective gear. And that was the closest we got to things going wrong. We got a little red, but we didn't lose any hair, thank goodness.
You were in multiple shows by Dick Wolf. What was it like working that world?
I was in Los Angeles. Bob Greenblatt, who was the head of NBC at the time, pulled me into his office and said, look, Dick Wolf is going to do a new show. It's basically going to be Law & Order, but in Chicago. At the time, I was like, why are you telling me that? And he said, I think you should meet with Dick Wolf. And I was like, okay. Fine, I'll meet with him. That's not what I've done. And I kind of love this trajectory that my career was on. I really enjoyed the excitement. I enjoyed these silly stunts and I enjoyed that world of being trained with the military and traveling around the world and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't know if I want to stand in a courtroom. So when I did meet Dick Wolf at his place, he pulled me into his office and he said, right, Bob Greenblatt says you're the guy. And I was like, this is news to me. The guy for what? And he said, the guy, I'm doing this new show. And I said, yeah. I said, and I don't know what possessed me to say this, but I said, I don't think I'm your guy. I said, I jump out of helicopters and I punch people in the face for a living. And he goes, he's brilliant, right? Dick Wolf is brilliant. And he goes, well, look, kid, if you don't like it, you can quit. And if I don't like you doing it, I'll fire you. And I was like, I think that's a pretty good job offer. Do you have a script that I can read? And he went, nope, but it'll be good. And I went, I don't think there's anything else I can say. So our meeting was it was probably 3 minutes long. So that was my introduction to Dick Wolf and the Dick Wolf universe. And I was fortunate enough to be challenged in a completely different way. So we did a backdoor pilot on a show called Chicago PD, which introduced my character, which was Peter Stone, which was Ben Stone's son from the original Law & Order. It was a baptism of fire, man. I mean, that legalese, that's 8 pages of dialogue every day and closing arguments and back and forth in the courtroom. You just got to get in there and do it. And I was not prepared for how hard that was going to be and the amount of work that was going to be. But it made me appreciate what I see on TV when you see these people, get up there and do these closing arguments and do the courtroom scenes. It's brutal. We did 13 episodes of Chicago Justice and then, the network world is funny, right? And it didn't go. But Dick Wolf, again, was incredibly kind. And I got a phone call from him and he said, these are the way these things go. Sometimes we don't know why. Would you like to go over to Law and Order? And so he really gave me, this life preserver when he didn't need to. And I moved from Chicago Justice over to Law and Order SVU with Mariska Hargitay for 2 years and was the kid who jumped out of helicopters and punched people in the face. And then I was getting punched in the face with the material and just the reality of how much work that was. And it was so good for me as an actor to have to just buckle down and, you just have to do your homework every night. And it was a great learning curve.
You've worked in both British and American productions. What are some differences that you've noticed between the two?
Just because I've had the opportunity to live in England, and I don't know how you feel about this, but sometimes in the US, particularly Los Angeles, there'll be more of an emphasis on looks and clothes and like the model element of a production. And with the European things or the English things, it really is about the work. Okay, why are we here? What are the choices we're making? And I love that sort of challenging that, coming to grips with that. It's like, yeah, you gotta look a certain way, but also it's so much about the story and about the words on the page and serving the story and serving the project rather than being selfish and wanting it all to be about you.
Well, you've worked in film, TV, and theater. Do you have a preference between the three?
They all scratch different itches, I think. Theater is all about preparation. The way, making independent movies is time costs money. And with theater, you get this beautiful window of 2, maybe 3 months where you're diving into the script, you're working scenes, you're going way out of the box and then way under, and you're figuring out what you want to do, what you want it to be, and then you whittle it down, and then you put it in front of an audience and you pressure test it, and you go, oh, we totally missed that. We need to go back and we try it again. And so and then in theater, you always get this immediate pressure test. So you go, I thought that was going to be great. The audience really didn't respond to that. I'll try something else tomorrow night. Film, especially indie film and television, is just, you can get a phone call on a Wednesday night. You're on set Friday morning, you're doing a guest role, and you just kind of have to pull something out of your socks and go, well, this is what's on the page. This is what I think this character should be like. And then I'll see if it works. And I'll see if the director likes it. And so often you really are just filling a spot. That doesn't happen all the time. I think the strength of Strike Back and the strength of Law and Order SVU and Chicago Justice was our guest roles were incredible. I was a prosecutor and the defense attorneys would come in. They were always guest roles for 1 or 2 episodes. And I just remember thinking, these people are incredible. Sometimes TV can be too fast for its own good and you don't get to live it. It's still fun because you get to travel and you get to meet cool people. Theater, you have that time. That sweet spot maybe is film, where you and the director get to talk about things and you get to hash out your character and you get to hash out reasons. And then you get to experiment with it in front of a camera. I still think about this, Alan. We did In My Sleep. We were talking about Marcus and him working out of something called a core lie. That we all operate, for better or worse, out of these things called core lies, whether, that we shouldn't believe, but we do. And if we're healthy, we work through them. And if we're not, we're like Marcus. We just medicate or, self-medicate. And I loved that process with you and with the other actors. And I'll never forget that. That was a real turning moment in being turned on to how powerful film can be, because it can impact your own life and hopefully the people who see it as well.
Wow, that's really encouraging to hear. It is amazing to think that the film came out 15 years ago. My director's cut came out recently. What was it like for you to see it for the first time after all these years?
Honestly, it was hugely encouraging. And also, to big you up, it's marvelous storytelling. So often you turn on the TV and you're like, what? How did that get made? Or how did that end up here? And it's hard to make stuff. But to make it and to make it well, your character development and the fact that you didn't leave anything untied was so clever and so thought out. Megan and I watched it the other night. We got into bed and we turned it on and we looked at each other afterwards and just went, that is a good movie. It's a really great thriller. Sometimes hard work doesn't pay off in terms of like the product gets, it gets jostled around in the edit or you lose control of it, right? you were very smart, and you, I think, fortunate enough to maintain that ownership of it, plus the control of the material. And so it feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like it still is your vision. And so I think that's why it's so good, because it wasn't touched by too many cooks. And the director's cut it's great. I love, like, the grade is just a little more modern. Those big shots of LA that kind of really steep you in the character of the city of Los Angeles, that really helps.
And you were in every single scene in My Sleep. I mean, that was a lot of work. What were your hopes that the audience would experience as they follow your character's journey?
You very courageously gave a new actor his first lead role. I had not led a film. I had not led a television series, you know. For me to turn around and, you know, and do this, I had to basically on the fly go, okay, what works, what doesn't work? And I learned probably from In My Sleep what I now use the rest of my career, which is scripts can change. So I learned my lines 2 days out. I learned the next days and the day after that. And then everything else is kind of still potentially in the edit. Sleep, food, and sort of conservation of energy on set, especially because Marcus had to look a certain way. Finding time to continue to train and also get sleep and also get food and also learn your lines and realizing, looking at actors who I'd admired or roles that I'd admired, going, these people are either crazy or great at time management, or both, I suppose. And so time management was a real thing that came out of In My Sleep. After all of that, you want to serve the story and you want to do the story justice. And so my hope with Marcus was to tell this Hitchcockian tale and try and get, you know, try and make people be entertained. I mean, that's why I do it. I like to tell stories, because sitting around a dinner table or at a coffee shop and seeing someone respond to something that you're telling them, I find really fun. And film is just a broader version of that, I feel.
Well, you've had a busy career and you also have a family. You have 2 girls that you're raising. How do you balance your acting career with your family life?
Balancing my career and my family is sort of a job-to-job choice. Sometimes you get a job in Bulgaria for 6 weeks and the girls are in school. And my wife and I made a decision really early on in my career that we wouldn't be apart for more than 2 weeks, because we felt that our marriage was important enough to protect and our relationship was important enough to protect. And now having kids, it's just gone that one step further. But sometimes in the reality, I think COVID, certainly when we were bubbled up and doing these things across the world and you couldn't have family near you or on set or flown around, it really changed that. And so that challenged our notion of what we thought was normal and what we made normal by having a 2-week rule. And so now we, you know, every once in a while I'll have to go and do an independent film somewhere, and it's 5-6 weeks. And I'm away from my family for a big chunk of time. I'm really fortunate that when I'm home, I'm fully home. So my relationships with my kids, with my 2 girls, I'm there for breakfast. On the weekends, I'm there for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We sit down every night as a family. We're incredibly fortunate that we do a job and we put it away in the war chest and we nibble away at it until the next job comes. But we do that in order to protect our family time. So really everything outside of work that doesn't have me traveling or has me at home has me being as involved as I can with my kids. So I was coaching football, I was coaching my daughter's, the soccer team, going to dance recitals, anything like that, reading stories at nighttime, and just being as present a father as I can be. I married an amazing woman who is not only understanding of what I do, but completely encouraging of it. And she knows that when that phone rings and it's last minute and I gotta go. Our marriage slogan is to try and outserve one another. And she's certainly winning, not that we're keeping score, but, but she's like, because I've been gone, there's so many times where I'm gone and she's a single mom, you know. The way we balance it is really present, really intentional on what we are and who we are when I am home. I had a moment the other day, I didn't know my biological father. I was just completely overwhelmed by this really strong sense that God has allowed me to spend not only my time with my kids, but the time that my dad didn't spend with me, with my kids. It was just this free gift, and I just thought, man, I was so thankful for that moment, because I just thought, yeah, that's pretty incredible. And I know how lucky we are.
You mentioned God. What has your spiritual journey looked like?
I was raised in a really religious household, and probably tried to buck it as an adolescent. I had a really amazing experience of God in an Anglican church in the UK. It was a spin-off it was a church plant from a church called HTB. And it was this small, charismatic Anglican church, if you can believe those two go together. It was really full of the Holy Spirit, really full of young people worshiping God and experiencing God and living in community together. And I thought, I'm going to show all you're all crazy religious fanatics. Long story short, God just showed up and wiped the floor with me. And that was 20 plus years ago.
Why would you go to that church to begin with?
A gal came up to me on the tube, and I had been out partying with friends and was, drinking and partying and being silly on the tube. And she came up and was like, "Hey, you guys need to settle down. You're gonna be careful. You'll fall on the tracks," kind of a thing. And I was like, "Oh, it's a pretty girl. Let's talk to her." And she obviously got my number. She called me a week later and said, "Hey, you want to come up to London and meet me?" I was like, "Yeah, pretty girl, let's go. I'll roll my cigarettes in my sleeve, ride my motorbike up to London. I'll show you." We had a coffee in South Kensington, and she said, "Look, the real reason I invited you up here was I would love to invite you to church." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'll go to church and I'll show you that you're all crazy nutbags." And then went in there, and God was like, "Oh yeah, boom." And just kind of had a real experience of peace and purpose, and I felt like I was home. You know what I mean? I felt a real sense of identity and purpose and comfort in the presence of this God.
And this all happened one time, going to church one time?
I'd gone to church as a kid. I was being judgmental. It was judgmental, very religious, and I had no concept of religion being people going to God, and there's this relational element of Jesus of Nazareth who says, no, I want to come to you, and I want to meet you, and I've actually made you in a way that if you let me, I will best show you how to live this life. And there are boundaries in your life that make you better, not worse. And they're there for your health, not to destroy you. And that concept of boundaries as a young drama school student in London was like, yeah, right. And there was this very real sense of, I mattered to God. We all matter to him. He cares about us. And he's created us in such a way to live. We can live these incredibly full lives, and it's just trusting him. Trust the story. The story is actually good if you trust it. I think probably anyone with faith, some days it's like, yeah, rock solid, let's go. Other days it's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And where are we at? And why did he put the tree in the middle of the garden? That's a really mean thing to do. If he was a loving God, he wouldn't have done that. And then you back up 1,000 feet and go, well, maybe it's because we're all 1 or 2 steps away from blowing our lives apart every day. And he was just showing us that, hey, you have to make hard decisions every day. This is real. It's good. I'm here for you to lean on and to trust. That spiritual journey is a daily journey, brother.
Did you have an impression of God that changed then through that experience?
100%. I had a completely false view of who God was and of what my relationship with him was. And so it became much more, there is the God of the universe, but we're also allowed to talk to him like a friend. And that's truly incredible. That really rocked me when I realized that there's a creator God who's also a father God, who's also a friend, And that very much changed in those moments at St. Mary's Church there in London.
You had mentioned earlier that you didn't have a relationship with your biological father. Do you think that experience impacted the way that you looked at God?
Almost certainly. And that was maybe perhaps affirmed during my younger years of going to a religious church where it was like, if God was there, it was there for punishment. And I didn't have a sense of what a good father looked like. So there was no sense of why would a father be good? They leave or they punish. Those lies and those scales just kind of fell away in that moment in London. And look, I felt, what I felt in that moment was just this voice that said, I love you. I've always loved you. And I want to be with you. And it was like, yeah, why would I turn away from that? That moment really transformed that initial pain and the initial lack of masculinity, lack of fatherhood, or just a not true perception of what fatherhood was, and it was replaced by this piece.
How did that new faith impact your artistic career?
I remember having discussions with my pastors about certain roles, or can I do this? Can I not do this? And not being sure about, again, what the boundaries were. So fast forward, 20, 23, 24 years now of being in the business, I have a much more stronger sense of who I am as a believer, and just who I am as a man. What do I want my kids to see when they grow up? It's not about quote unquote success and the big and all that stuff and the shiny things and the magazines, and it was at one point. I always feel, no matter what, grateful for the work, no matter what it is. I really do, because I think that work begets work. I think that you learn on every single job, and my faith has influenced my work, because now when I go to a job, I say, in my prayers, I say, Lord, thank you for this job. Now what's the job? And without fail, I'll meet someone who's just super dope. And just, I'm like, oh my gosh. And like we hit it off about life, or we hit it off about something that's going on in the world. And I'm like, okay, this is the reason I'm here. You know what I mean? And making really cool relationships on jobs. Like, the work is the work and it's important, but the people and the relationships, like that's everything. I've been really honored to be a part of everything that I'm a part of, and allow the Lord to go, all right, now here's this over here. I need you to do this while you're doing this, or we're in this place for this reason. And so I think that's what's changed, certainly in the last few years, certainly probably since COVID especially, where we were like, are we ever going to work again? And so every job's a gift, and the people you work with.
How do you stay spiritually healthy while working in entertainment?
I have a group of guys that meets every Friday morning when I'm home. We hash it out. We're not all professionally involved in media or in film and television. They're all dads. So I have accountability. I have people I can talk to and say, hey, this thing's pinged up. And great guys who are like, yeah, you should probably not do that, you dumbass. Or just like to stand with you, So it's accountability. I talk with my wife multiple times a day, and I set aside time to be in front of God. I set aside time especially when I'm away. It's really like, before the gym, before breakfast, or whatever it is, it's like I spend time in scripture, and I spend time with him, trying to figure out what he's trying to tell me, or what's going on with the day. And so it starts that way. And then I think thankfulness, just having a heart of gratitude, because this is silly and you never know how long you get to do it. And so I'm really grateful for everything that I get to be a part of.
Can you tell us about a moment in your career when you felt discouraged and you wondered what would happen next?
There was quite a few years where I just went back to back projects. And they were, in business speak, they were like making it, like they were offers. The phone would ring and there would be other offers on the table, and you and your agent were doing that insane thing of picking between projects, of going, well, this one's this and that one's that, and what do you really want to do? And so 6, 7, 8 years of that, just like boom, 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 boom. And then my daughter, James, was born. I had 2 weeks off. The producers on SVU gave me 2 weeks off, which was incredible. I came home, unclicking James from the back seat, and my agent called. Hey, buddy. And you can always tell, right, with agents, because they're like, hey, man, it's like greatest thing in the world. Or, yo, buddy, yo. And I was like, oh, I got the yo, buddy. And he goes, so they're not going to renew you on SVU. And I was like, what do you mean they're not going to? What do you mean? We have a 4-year contract. It's 2 years in. He's like, yeah, they're not going to renew you. Okay, well, surely there's a mistake. Like, come on, what do you mean? This is what we do. I haven't done anything wrong. There was no indication that was going to be the case. And then I had to go back to work 3 more episodes. It was fired, and I had to go back and be like, hey, let's keep playing ball, everybody. Like, it was just brutal, and that was worse than, because the business can be the business, right? You hear these horror stories, like with Player, quite literally on the way to work, we had a 13 episode order. We were shooting episode, I can't remember now, it was 8 or 9. And on the way to set, I get the, yo, man. And I was like, what are you talking about? We haven't shot 13 episodes. They're like, yeah, they're pulling the plug. And I was like, well, look, we'll finish, a few episodes. They're like, no, they're pulling the plug tonight. And when I got to set, they were pulling trailers off of set. Like, the studio was wasting, like, we changed in the bathroom for the final day kind of a thing. It was like, they were like, we're done. And you just go, wow, this business, right? You can't put your worth in it because it's just, It's pixie dust. So there were some hard-hitting moments. You think you're not putting your hope in it, but when the rubber meets the road, you're like, oh man, I put a lot of eggs in that basket, man. My identity's really has been in Peter Stone, and then you got to just go back to basics, and you eat good meals with people you love and who love you, and you lick your wounds. And my dad said something when I was younger, and I don't think he understood the magnitude of it. He's a big golfer, and he said, look, buddy, you just got to hit it and forget it. And there's definitely an element to hitting it and forgetting it in this game, right? Hope it goes where you want, but you can't spend too much time thinking about it.
At the end of your life, what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
I alluded to earlier, like when I was at drama school, when I was 18 years old, I wanted to be famous, and I wanted to be a movie star or a TV star or whatever that meant, you know. I am not opposed to success in whatever form that it does or doesn't come. I have been incredibly fortunate and incredibly successful. My goal was always, if I can put food on the table and I can keep a roof over our heads and provide for my family, that is incredibly successful. And I feel very, very fortunate to be able to do those things as an actor. And I've just been an actor, you know. In terms of legacy, now it's about my kids. There was a great quote that I heard a long time ago on a podcast. I think he was a British guy who worked in the banking systems, and I can't remember his name, but he packed it all up and he moved his 3 daughters to the woods to literally to live on a farm in the woods with him and his wife. And one of his friends was like, dude, you've worked your whole life to be as successful as you were and high up in the banking business. And he was like, we all give our life to something, all of us. No matter where you are in this world, you're giving your life to something. It's your job, it's your addictions, it's your something. You are giving your life and your energy to something. And I wanted to give my life to something that mattered. I love that. And I think the meaning of life is relationships. If I can give the things I learned to the next generation, if I can protect my daughters in as much as I can from the things that the world is trying to do to them or trying to steal from them, and if I can be an honorable husband to my wife and love her all the way to heaven, I think that's a pretty good ride, man. Maybe that's a little cliche, but it really is like, man, just like, okay, all this stuff here is sort of temporary, right? So I remember being in LA for the premiere of Batman, and it was the one with Tom Hardy, so Bane and all that. And I remember the fanfare, like the build up for Dark Knight was like, this is going to be, oh my gosh, everything. And then it came in, I think it was at the ArcLight, right? The premiere was at there. And it came and went, and guess what happened the next day? Nothing happened the next day. It came and went. It's a great movie. Okay, that's it. I remember really, it planted a seed, and I went, I'm going to spend my whole life trying for that next success or trying for that next job. And that lie of the next job's going to make me happy. That next job's going to make me better. That next job's going to be the thing where I don't have to work as much and I can focus on my family. It's all rubbish. I love my job, but my family, man, that's just become, it's my reason to get up in the morning, you know. If I can be a good dad and a good friend and a good husband, that's a good way to go, I think.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being my guest.
Oh, Ellen, it's so good to see you. It's a great trip down memory lane.
Oh, yes. And I loved hearing your stories and just how encouraging your career and your life lessons have been.
I feel really honored to share them with you. And we have shared a lot. And it's been fun to see you go as well, man. And to become a great father and a great husband. It's really beautiful, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If you work in entertainment, check out the complimentary courses and other resources available at navigatinghollywood.org. Please follow us and leave us a review so others can discover this podcast. You can find our other shows, transcripts, links, and more at navigatinghollywood.org. I look forward to being with you next time.